So I think the connection here vis-a-vis Martin Luther King is King's use and ideas about love, and particularly one kind of love, agape, which is a Greek word, and it's like divine love or supreme love. And this idea for him, well, he defined that. I'll tell you his definition. Agape is purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative. It is the love of God operating in the human heart. Lecture in 1957. A sermon in 1957. I think that idea of divine love, of that, you can tell we're getting towards music already, spontaneous and creative, obviously is in play. Unmotivated and groundless is less easy to connect to music, but it means love that doesn't have to be reciprocated. Right? So this is at the core of his ideas of nonviolence, and this idea that God is humanly accessible, and we can feel God by loving unconditionally. This comes very much out of Christianity, but I think this is a very universal idea as well, right? It's from this idea of agape that I think drove King to move from being just a minister into a legal battle, right? And so it's moving from the inside of church to the public sphere, right? And then from that legal battle, he then steps even farther into politics. He stands against the Vietnam War, international politics, right? So it's this love that sort of shoots an arrow out into the world that makes these sort of ideas that I think are very implicitly made explicit and moved outward. So in that regard, I think that that stuff is really similar when we think about, well, how can music be political? Right? So even having an event on Martin Luther King Day is explicitly political. We're here, in some sense, maybe just because it's a Monday, hopefully it's more than that for us. And so now you're here at the panel discussion, so you have no choice but to think about it politically. But I think music is always implicitly political because it gives us a pretty good understanding of these messages of love, of being spontaneous, of what it means to be spontaneous, of what it means to be creative, and also what it means to be unmotivated and groundless. So that seems like not what you want to hear musically, but it is, because it means that it's musically done for the sake of itself, right? That it becomes beautiful in its own right, and it becomes beautiful in its doing. So I think, if we think about that in the history of LA, all of these people have composed music that has explicit, spiritual. That's the other thing too, we say political, but especially for Martin Luther King, this is always tied up with a spiritual message, right? So all three of you have composed music that I think is explicitly spiritual, and because of that, implicitly political. In other words, it's about how you can learn lessons about what it means to be with other people from listening to the music. And I think on top of that, playing the music, there's this sense of the implicit love for each other that I think gets manifested in terms of a sense of community and scene. Some people ground that in terms of place. We're all from Los Angeles, all of us. We all made music in Los Angeles, right? But I think it's more than just sense of place, it's sense of care, right? And then that sense of care, I think, has been really evident through all of your careers, that this has always been a career that's more about caring for other people and supporting other people, not necessarily financially, but in that sense of moral support. And moral, I don't think, is a coincidence there, also going back to Martin Luther King. So, hopefully that'll start to generate some ideas in your heads. Another thing I think important to think about, that sense of moral support is continued on as part of a history, an effective history. And two really important figures, I think, in this that served as mentors and as moral support for all of us, Horace Tapscott and John Carter played that role as well. So, with that, that's my sail. I wonder if he's going to blow some wind on the sail.
You want to go first, Bob, or something? If you feel something, go fine.
First of all, I thought that was very poetic.
Yeah.
insightful, and just downright cool. Thank you. Well, I'll start off by saying in the Gospel of John it states very clearly God is love. And, and then once again it states in the Gospels that there is no thing that is created or was created that was not created by God. Therefore, jazz is created, first of all, by God. Secondly, in the same way that the Bible says that salvation came from the Jews and that Jesus Christ was a Jew, jazz came from the African American here in America. But the beginnings of this music and the love that we spoke about, and by the way, one of the reasons that I am a quote-unquote jazz musician is that while most of my training on my instrument has been classical training, the reason that I play this music is because the jazz musicians that I went to, my three mentors, Bradford. I've been playing with Bobby since I was 19 years old. Horace Tapscott and John Carter. One of the ways in which they taught me, they taught us all, Vinny and James Newton and a lot of us. They taught us because they loved us and they respected us, and they gave us the freedom to be who we are in the music, at the same time challenging us to play the highest possible standard that we can play, because that's what they were doing. If you listen to some of the things that John Carter and Bobby Bradford did, some of the heads that they play together are just virtuosic. It's just amazing music, and so they set the standard very, very high, and they taught Vinny and I and all the people that have been influenced to try not to fall below that standard. But when we have difficulty in reaching that standard, the way that they motivate us is primarily through love. And so I want to just point the finger at Bobby Bradford here, because he's Bobby Bradford.
Thank you, Robert. First of all, we're happy to see you here tonight, those of you who came out to share this with us. But in connection with Martin Luther King, the first thing that comes to my mind, beyond everything that you said there, is the courage. And what that means to me, in very specific terms, is using nonviolence with people who don't believe in it. The other guys. You're saying, I want to take this, I want to take that, I want to use this nonviolence to get this kind of thing, like that Bull Connors, is that his name? And the dogs and all. See, they didn't believe in that. And you think, how could I want to try to use this with somebody that doesn't believe in it. It's not going to make any sense. And so how do I continue this? I believe in it strongly enough myself to summon the courage to continue to do it. So in my mind, courage and love are interlocked. It's like in human relationships. We spend me anyway, your whole life trying to grow up. And I mean that. From my point of view, grow up. That's painful. As an adult, you have children, you have a spouse, you have the job thing, you have trying to stay above water economically, you're trying to do something that you feel is important, like playing this music, because, I have no regrets about it, but I've never made a real living playing music. The times when people thought I was really working in New York and doing this and all that, I was sleeping on somebody's couch. I'm not complaining now, I'd do it again. I'm thinking of this really good friend of mine who, I I can't believe he did it. He had a daughter about, 8 years old. I just met the wife then, but I knew him. And he talked to his wife about it, and he said, well, Bradford, the best I can do for you is you can come every night after we go to bed, and you got to get up and be out of the house by the time we wake up. So why am I doing this? Because I love this music. And I have to do it while I can. At the age that there's some virility in what I'm doing. And so, to make a long story short here, love and courage in connecting with Martin Luther King, or with all of us in our daily lives. Love and courage are connected. There are times when you have to say to yourself, I have to do this. It makes no sense, except that I'm driven. And what comes to mind is John Carter, the late John Carter, clarinet player, who we both played together for I don't know how many years, probably since the middle or late 60s. And people weren't even taking us seriously. I remember some guys saying, well, what are you trying to do? Is this classical music? You get questions like that. So I don't think it's a valid question. You never mistake anything John Carter or I played as classical music. Nobody on your worst day. But that doesn't mean we don't know how to use some of the things that we learned from classical music. And I was just saying to Roberto and Hafez a minute ago, we were talking about programs in graduate programs in colleges around the country where people are trying to identify jazz via a particular community or from a world perspective. It just meant that you're not supposed to abandon that. I never once was going to be dumb enough to abandon Beethoven because I like Charlie Parker. That's stupid. See what I mean? Now, you can talk about Beethoven's parents and all that European colonial program and all that. That's another issue, but just the nuts and bolts of music. I had students that say to me sometimes, especially in the 60s, when the new black nationalism and new consciousness was making its move on the scene, I was never dumb enough to say, as I heard friends of mine say, well, you have to, that European music, that's trash. So we're not on the same page. You can't raise one agenda by stepping on another, you see. And that was the problem at the beginning of jazz here. So how can we have these people that we try to identify during the day as stupid and shuffling around, low intelligence and blah, 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 and then glorify the music in the next breath? We got to figure out a way to make those things live together. And so that was the problem, which moved that into the political arena. And the music happened to be the vehicle for bouncing back and forth. But I have some ambivalence about some things that have happened in my life, but they're certainly not about my choices in the music that I want to play, which I'm going to be playing until heart stops beating. Vinny?
Am I supposed to follow that? I can't follow that. So I'm going to go my own way.
Which is what you do always.
That's kind of true. Do we really need these? Do we really need
Yes.
Yeah.
Recording, yeah.
Use it.
My initial path is a little different than these guys. I started in the visual arts, and it was through a painting show that I met Bob. And at the time, I had done I was attracted to music, so I used to go to all the clubs and draw musicians, mostly musicians equated with different forms of like newer music. That really hit some kind of buttons. I saw some connections between spiritual aspects of Kandinsky's paintings and Nicholas Roche and a few others, Rothko. You can equate the sounds like with Rothko to maybe Paul Bley, and maybe you can associate Kandinsky with Ornette or something else. I mean, you can make all these assumptions and stuff, but the thing was like the spark was the same, but in the music that I was experiencing and drawing pictures of people like Sun Ra, et cetera, what we call this word spirituality, which is a very vague word, was very present. And it touched everybody it came in contact with. And I got touched, and I wanted to be a part of that too. And people like John and Bobby and Horace allowed me to do that. And they showed me like, huh. So you used to do something else, and now you're picking up this instrument and think you're going to play with us. But they never said that. They said like, wow, that's great. You picked up an instrument? Let's hear what you do. That was the first words out of Bob's mouth. I said, really? You're not painting anymore? Why don't you bring that saxophone over and let's see what you can do with it. It was like a challenge, but yeah, an invitation. And all through my entire life, these guys, including Roberto, man, I have a picture of Roberto playing it, but while Roberto was in college or something, surrounded by garbage cans, taking out the trash, but he kept his bass outside so he could practice. He'd take the bass, empty the trash out, and you remember that? I have that picture. It's like a picture, I don't know where the hell it came from, but I have it. And it's like him, it's just surrounded by garbage cans and stuff like that. It's amazing. And when I first, Roberto played on my last painting show. You played with Ernie Watts and Pete Robinson, Marty Crystal, and a bunch of those guys. It was in 1972, you probably don't remember. But he was one of the bass players. There were two bass players. Dave Pritchard and all these guys are like a real mixed group. And another, just a little gem on this thing is like, Ernie Watts, for example. Ernie was playing with Oliver Nelson at the time. Ernie drove 100 miles to come and play at my painting show for free. Didn't even know me. Played in this group, played, packed up, went home, played with Oliver the next night. He did 2 nights like that. Never got a cent. There was no money. Everybody played for free. John and Fritz Wise and Nate Morgan played. Bob was supposed to play, but he got called to go. He got called by Annette to play science fiction. So here's another example. I get a phone call from Bob. Bob, Van, it's Bob Bradford. I said, hey Bob, how you doing? He said, okay, but the painting show, yeah. Arnett's called me to do a record date in New York. He said, but I already said that I would do your show, so should I just tell him that I can't go? And I said, no, excuse me. I said, are you fucking crazy? It's Arnett. You've never recorded with Arnett. You're the first guy with Arnett. You need to be there. Don't worry about it. But he had to ask because he said, I gave you my word I would do it. And so I can't do it. So I wanted to see if you let me go. And that tells you just a lot about character. I mean, this isn't stuff you make up in a book. So you want to talk about all the lofty ideals and stuff like that, that's great. But when you see it and you experience it and people open the doors for you, if you don't go in the door, that's not on anybody else but you. So you have to figure out like why you want to open the door, why you want to go in the door, and if you want to see what's on the other side, because the other side is you. And then you can do things. So that means like when you see somebody in a bank line giving some shit to somebody, and they're really kind of bullying somebody, you say like, hey buddy, you want to try that with me? You know, or you see somebody picking on somebody else and you just step in and say like, I think that's enough. You know, you can do that. You can stand up for somebody who maybe shopping bag broke and it's a poor lady with 3 kids and they got to pick it, you know, they're trying to pick stuff up and the kids are running around like crazy. Those are little things. But those kind of things all come out of this kind of music.
Yeah.
Because all the people that are involved in it are a community together. Now, sometimes there's little riffs and whatever, because that's a musical term, right, Charles? He's a musicologist, so he knows this. Riff, R-I-F-F. However, in some cultures, it means a repetitive pattern, right? In African culture, it means a repetitive
Mountain range.
It's a mountain range. Where? You made that up. You made
Oh, yeah. Mountains, that's in,
So,
Morocco.
anyway, that's what this is. I'm giving the microphone back, but those are just some colorations on Bob.
fun with that to me. Well, you know, it's more than that. I mean, we've all had enough right now. I think you know what I'm talking about. We've all seen that, right? And so what are the resources that we can take from the lesson? I mean, from Martin Luther King, I think that the lesson is obvious, that you can't stand with evil. That's, first of all, how can I get there from this music? That's more pertinent to our discussion now. I'm talking about the president, if you don't know what I'm talking about. You have to stand up. Well, where do you get that courage? Where do you get that? And I think, personally, as a listener, listening to all of your music, it's helpful to me to turn my attention to the love that's demonstrated through the music and through the personal histories as well. But I think that's there in the music as well. This is why it's improvisational, and it's why I want to listen to it as improvisation, because I can see love and support and courage and bravery. It's the courage and bravery of standing up. In simple and safe aesthetic terms, you're going to make a statement, but you're making that with people who are going to accept it, right? And then there are people who are accepting it are pushing you and encouraging you to make those bold leaps, right? And I think as listeners, I hope we can take an important lesson from that, to have the courage to act up in the face of injustice, to have the courage to say when enough is enough, and to have the courage to let those lessons bleed through from the safe spaces of music into the world of action, into the world of legality and in politics in the same way. Yeah.
Any questions?
We'll now take questions.
I feel, first of all, I'm very grateful for what the four of you said, and it really reflects how I feel too. And I just thought perhaps, you know, these words like love and courage, they get manifested or embodied through individuals. And so the fact that you three, us, all of us, are here this evening for this music, I wonder if you could describe, you know, because you're coming here, and you know, Vijay, and we had conversations about it when Vijay would ask me, Hafez, do you think that if I call Roberto, do you think he might want to do it? Like, you know, there's that feeling of like, well, I'm not sure, I mean, Bobby, Brad, Vinny. And I said, well, call them, you know, and now here you are. So to me, everything you were talking about, you're actively still doing it, because you're here tonight playing this music, you know, again, but for the first time, and it, to me, it embodies all of this. So I wondered if you could talk about, like, you know, what brought you here tonight? What brought you here tonight? That would also give me some courage.
Well, I'm here because Vijay called me. By the way, Vijay, would you stand up just in case people don't know you? This is the brother that composed and arranged all of the music that you will hear tonight. And so one of the things that I dig about Vijay is the fact that he's one of a growing number of percussionists who are also composers. And you know, all of us are affected, I think that's the correct term to use right now, in some ways by the instrument we play in terms of how we approach composition. I compose, besides playing string bass, I also play congas. My father was my first music teacher. Both my parents are from Puerto Rico, and my first instrument was congas, which I still play and still teach. So I'm not a pianist, but I know how the piano works. And so when I compose, I often will compose on piano, but sometimes I will simply come up with a rhythm on conga drums, or I'll compose some melodies on bass, things like that. So the instruments that I play affect the way in which I write, and also the other things that affect the way in which I write are nature and the musicians that I listen to, Duke Ellington, Charles Mingus, Scotty O'Farrell, Bobby Bradford, just to name a few. But I'm just so happy that VJ called me, because I think that he's one of the musicians that's on the scene today that is writing music in a way that respects the tradition that we come from, but also makes a contribution to the music. You know, one of the things, I don't know if Bobby remembers saying this, but he said, you know, we don't need another Charles Mingus. We need a Roberto Miranda. And I say that to my students. You listen to Charles Mingus, you listen to whomever it is that you listen to, but we don't need another one of those. We need for you to make your own contribution to this music, because that is the way in which your love and your respect and even your challenge manifests itself. So I'm just so happy that VJ had the courage to write the music, that he had the inspiration from Hafez, who, if I'm not mistaken, VJ, you studied with Hafez?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so see, there we have another passing the music, right? So Hafez is now playing with one of his students, and or ex-students, right? And I have my students, I have 2 students playing in my band right now, and they're kicking me. They're challenging me to say, okay, Pops, let's take it to the next level. And boom, there that is.
I'm here because VJ called me too. Which on some level he says to me that I've heard you play, I'd like for you to be a part of what I'm doing, which sort of helps me overcome any doubt I had about what I'm, partially anyway, about what I'm doing. Because I've experienced, as most of us have, a lot of resistance. I remember about 10 years ago, a guy showed up at LACMA that I knew back in Los Angeles in the mid-50s. And I hadn't seen him since, it was a long time. So he comes up and I said, he made me remember him. He said, what happened to you? He said, you used to be a good trumpet player. He said, we were at LACMA, right? I said, what? He said, yeah, I remember when you were playing around town with the cats in LA, and I was a bopper here in Los Angeles in the 1953, 54. And I was trying to get a handle on the bebop language. That was my entry into this music. When I was, actually, I guess this is the best way to describe it. I was aware of jazz music now as a little kid because my father liked it. My father was an amateur clarinet player, and he sang in the church choir, and he played a little piano and all, and he liked the big bands. So when I was a kid, you could hear the big band music still on radio, but I thought, that's great. and I'm from Mississippi originally, so the first 10 years of my life, you see, there's no way to turn without hearing that Delta blues. But I thought that's okay too. But I wasn't knocked out of my socks until I heard Fats Navarro and Dexter Gordon play Index. Some of the jazz people like do 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 da boom boom bam boom ba do do bum 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 bum. And Fats Navarro said boom 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 bum beep bop bop beep bop. And I said, oh my, what was that? And my hat of socks haven't been back on since. You see, so but once then the next big move after trying to embrace that music, you see, at that point I thought, well, this is one of the Bob phrases. Charlie Parker, like good, the bird is the end. That was a kind of cheesy phrase. Because I was listening to the records, transcribing what I could from the record, but I wasn't limited to trumpet players. If I heard something Bud Powell played on the piano, I was trying to get that on the trumpet because I liked the line. And sometimes, you see, it didn't work. But that didn't change my attitude about the music. Then I heard this on at Coleman. And this guy, I thought, well, Charlie Parker was not the end. But now, I don't want to turn this into some kind of lecture here now. But the point I'm trying to raise here is that when this guy said to me, what happened to you? He said, you used to be a good trumpet player. Now you're playing all this pre-jazz stuff. He said, I remember when you started fooling with Ornette Coleman. This guy, as I remember now, he was a conga drummer. I can't remember his name now, but I do remember this. He's on a record with Art Farmer and Wardell Gray. This guy playing with congas on that level, just moving into jazz. You know, when you hear jazz quintet and a conga drummer, like 1952, 53. But anyway, he said, God, what happened to you? I felt so really bad, and I thought, what do you mean, what happened to me? I said, I try to stay alive in the music and move along with the things that I really love. And he said, oh, he went on and on telling me how awful he thought that was, and I began to feel really badly about it. I said, you liked what I was playing back in 1952, 53. And then I had the presence of mind to say, you see, well, I left you back there. Yeah, I didn't say it like that, but you see, that's just like with Coltrane. If you'd say to him, after Coltrane played my favorite things, you see all those beautiful ballads with Johnny Hartman, then you put it on the turntable Interstellar Space, you wouldn't say, John Coltrane, what happened to you, man? You'd say, what do you say? I left you back there with my favorite things. You see, so I'm not equating my experience now with John Coltrane. The point is, I heard something else in Ornette Coleman's music. And what I heard was a place that I thought I could have an identity in. Not supposed to use prepositions to end your sentences with, but I'm going to go ahead. So I found that in this guy's music, though he had no technical explanation for it, the spirituality of his music was there. Because there was a point at which, if you said to both of us, then spiritualism in music, well, spiritualism to me meant just going to church every Sunday, see, and prayer meeting on Thursday night. I didn't get the big picture about spirituality as I would come to. And so I don't get too far off track here. When somebody like VJ called me, that he's saying to me now, man, I'm on some level now strengthening your resolve to keep doing what you're doing, because I like what I heard, and we hadn't had any conversation about it. It's like somebody said, I want you to do this. So you sure you got the right guy? I said, yeah, I heard that's on the same page that I'm on. And that's why I'm here, you know. I'm not telling these other guys how much you're paying me, BJ, so don't worry.
Well, I didn't get a phone call from BJ. I got an email. I had an email, and it just said, you know, we're doing this, you want to do it again? I said, same band? He said, yeah. I said, yeah. You know, I played with BJ a long time now, actually, with Adam Lane and a few other people. He plays in a group I have in San Francisco. And it's always quite fun to play. Music is always lively. It doesn't sag. There's no questioning. It's like, even when there are questions, people take the initiative and just do something, and people go with it. It's another way of like reinforcing this way of looking at things where everything is kind of one, to go back to the spirituality thing. And that relates to me when I was a kid. I'm from New York. We didn't have a lot of blues. Blues were just like everyday stuff in the Bronx. And so my dad worked in a zoo, but I was fortunate enough to have the street stuff that was happening there, and then this isolated area of however many acres of land with these magnificent animals from all over the world. Now, I don't like zoos per se. However, growing up as a child, I grew up next to kids that never saw a live chicken. And I'm talking about aardvarks and, you know, well, this kind of animals that people had never seen. But the thing that's the key here is that people from other countries would come to the zoo and give gifts. The gifts would be animals from their country. Along with the animals, they would often have processions with the music of their countries. So I grew up listening to world music without knowing it was music of the world. I thought all the music was the same. So my dad liked jazz, but swing stuff and Dixieland. And my mom liked country western music. But they thought I should have an education, and they played these light classical things at home that were mostly Italian singers and stuff. And I never realized until very late in life that somebody said, like, of course you sound the way you sound. Bel canto, it's Italian. So I put all these things together, but you kind of put these things together as people mention them to you and you think about it. And this stuff comes to you and you realize, like, okay, there's no difference between Stockhausen and Ornette, or actually with Ornette and Schoenberg. And one time Bob told a story about Ornette having them play the music frontwards, backwards, inverted, and then backwards inverted, which is all the 12-tone ways that you would play something. There's the original inversion, retrograde inversion. All those things were right there, and he did it intuitively. So there really is no connection outside of like something being separate. It's not separate. It's all together. I didn't say that right, but you know, like everything is like kind of always connected in some way or form. It's not isolated. Everything influences something else. Another thing you learn from studying color, there's a book called On the Interactions of Color by Joseph Albers. All the prints in the book are hand-screened prints. And they talk about how one color influences the color next to it. And the more you look at it, like this is a white wall, when I put my hand here, my hand seems quite reddish and pinkish, right? If I put it next to Bob, it looks more pale now. If I put it next to Roberto, it's going to look a different way. If I put it against my shirt, it's going to look a different way. All this stuff is changing constantly. That's the nature of like, you know, as science goes more and more into things, they find these things that connect things. Now there's gluons, there's all this stuff. But when you study like in Indian philosophy, you find that there's all this action, motion, everything's in motion. Some things vibrate faster than others. You know, you look at Coltrane's cycle of fifths, he's got it figured out, some metaphysical way that goes to the actual ascending and descending yugas. It's just phenomenal. There's no difference in anything. That's why when I compose, I feel free to do whatever I want. Most of the time, I'm playing my own music with other people. You know, Roper's been in a band. I mean, why does everybody just call you Roper? Bill, William, he's in a band, and he's, you know, he's been, like, here's a good example. He's been like a really good example of something like, Vinny, are you sure you want to do this? Like this? You know? I mean, it's his way of like discussing and pointing out something and saying like, look, you could look at this way, it'd be a lot easier if you came at it this way. Or he might say, or somebody else might say, it's like, I'll say like, oh, that note, just turn it over. And they'll say, no, you mess with the harmony, you invert the harmony is inverted. What? Oh, I didn't even realize that. Okay, you know, they'll make it so that you're learning something all the time. And that's the beauty of the music. It's like you're constantly growing, you can't stand still. If you can't stand still and you don't practice and you don't keep up with everybody, you fall. You fall, I don't get the email from DJ. It's just that simple. You have to stay on top of the game. You know? I mean, all my students, my entire band is made up of students, ex-students, and now I'm the student, because they're kicking ass, and that's what they do. I mean, and that's the best thing about teaching, is like you learn from your students, they push your ass, and then you, every once in a while, get in front of them and go like, oh. It's like playing, like listening to Warren Marsh. Here's a great example. Warren Marsh plays a tune, try and figure out where he is. You think you know where he is, but all of a sudden he's behind you. What? How did he get behind me? Oh, now he's in front of me. Oh, he's not speeding up, he's not slowing down, he's just modulating all the time. It's like listening to Carnatic music and a saxophone, but not that guy. Not Gopal Ramakrishna. More like Roberto or something like that. Yeah.